welcome to another RepVue conversation. I'm excited today to be speaking with Derek Wang from UserGems. Welcome, Derek.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
For sure. So, really excited to talk to you. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while because, quite simply, UserGems is one of the highest rated sales organizations on RepVue. And so, really excited to talk to you about kind of what goes into managing a really high rated organization that sellers really seem to like selling for. Yeah. So, let's start with just a bit about you and just to give some context for people listening, and then we'll jump into obviously the sales org. So start off, just give us a brief intro and tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. I think quick background on me. I've kind of always been in go to market at early stage startups. I think 0 to 1 type builds. Specifically at UserGems, I was the sixth employee and first sales hire about 5 years ago. And so it's been a fun run here.
Yeah, so actually let me just jump into that a little bit. So you were hired before there were any other salespeople. You were kind of the original salespeople, boots on the ground selling. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
It was originally founder led CEO sales. And
got it.
yeah.
And tell us a little bit. I'm curious how the kind of the offering or the value proposition has it evolved and changed a lot over the years, or is it still kind of the core offering that it was when you joined? I'm sure that obviously features and things have developed, no doubt, but curious the degree of change.
Yeah, I think there's been multiple evolutions for UserGems over the past several years, and I think it's only the momentum and pace of change is only increasing as the tech landscape develops. Many people still know us kind of for our original bread and butter point solution, which was champion tracking, and now the way that go-to-market teams operate us is basically using us as the central command center for running their entire outbound and ABM motions.
Got it. Okay. So I diverted us, but we'll get back to that, the core of that in a second. But in terms of you, tell us a little bit more about, I know you and the headquarters are based in the Bay Area, I believe, or San Francisco specifically. Is that right?
Paper, yes.
Okay.
I'm the only one or I'm based there, and some of my C-suite comes out pretty often, though we're a remote first company. We've got people all over the US and the world.
Okay. And give us a little bit of context or color around you and kind of what you like to do, something, that's particularly uh, fun to do outside of work that you're into. What can you share?
Yeah, I think holistically, I'm a huge traveler and foodie. In the winter, it's kind of all about skiing for me. And then right now, kind of my newest hobbies are I just picked up swimming and just ordered a pair of rollerblades arriving
Nice.
next week. So that'll be something I'm getting into.
Nice. Nice. Okay, cool. And then when you were younger, you mentioned you were the founding salesperson at UserGems. Have you always been in sales? Did you have sales experiences when you were young? What did you come to sales? What was your path to sales?
Yeah, I think there were definitely some early indicators that I had kind of this natural sales spirit. I was like the elementary school kid that was selling Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh cards and
Hmm.
trading up, and then middle school was running my own candy business out of school, and then
Nice.
high school I kind of upgraded to selling jailbroken iPhones at the time.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. I'm sure there's quite a market for those. So tell us, okay, so let's get back to user gems. So you gave us kind of the short version. Let's expand on that a bit with currently, if somebody, if you meet somebody at a party or maybe somebody who's not totally up to speed on the industry, kind of how do you generally describe the value proposition for user gems?
It's a good question. For someone who probably isn't too familiar, it would probably sound a little something like this. So, Jordan, imagine you're throwing darts in the dark. That's what sales and marketing looks like today. Thousands of emails and calls going out with no response. UserGems turns the lights on. It's AI that tells you precisely who to contact, when to reach out, and what to say.
Okay, cool. I like that. That's pretty compelling for sure. So let's get into what it's like to be on your team specifically. We'll get into some of the specifics of your RepVue score, but first, just from your perspective, what would you say is like one habit that you really like to see on your team that maybe 90% of sellers who are successful at UserGems have?
Yeah, I think it's tough to boil it down to one thing, though. If I had to point to the main thing, it's that they have a religious mindset around learning. Our best reps are in Gong, watching calls all the time, their own calls, their peers' calls. They're asking for feedback proactively. They're doing live role plays, taking active notes when they get feedback. And they never really get satisfied with where they are, even if they're crushing their quota and at the top of the leaderboard. They're always looking for new ways to level up.
Okay. So a lot of learning from each other and collaboration. Just let's talk a little more broadly about the sales culture. What kind of would you say defines the culture in general, or the sales culture specifically at UserGems?
Yeah, in 4 words, it would be high talent, low ego.
Okay.
And to expand on that, everyone's just trying to get better. And more importantly, everyone is trying to make their teammates better. There's no like secret keeping or guarding of like the
Hmm.
best resources and tips and tricks. Truly, the team is incredibly collaborative and their desire to grow compounds off each other.
Okay. So that's interesting because I'm sure a lot of leaders and salespeople or business leaders in general aspire to that. But in my experience, that's really set at the top. That's really a leadership, culture. What I'm curious, as a sales leader, are there ways that you look to kind of foster that sort of, low ego, lack of politics? Like how do you make sure that people know that, that's what's expected at user gems, or just that those kind of, obviously sales is competitive, right? So that's an interesting dynamic to try to preserve in a naturally competitive, function. Are there some leadership approaches that you take to try to foster that?
Yeah, I think 90% of the work is done up front in hiring the right traits in your seller. We want sellers who are naturally a lot more collaborative and enjoy working in these team environments and believe in kind of driving the greater mission of furthering a department, team, and company as a whole, more so than just trying to hit their own quota, right? And then, so I think most of the work is done up front there. And then
Hmm.
secondarily, once they're in seat, of course, like to kind of safeguard that culture, we set a big culture around winning and winning as a team. And so there's a whole lot of team selling. We have a saying here that you should never win or lose a deal alone.
Hmm.
And when that's kind of the tempo and pace that's set, it creates this environment where people are excited to riff off their peers, their managers, and even cross departmental folks.
So you brought up an interesting point around doing the work up front, specifically around hiring. It makes me curious. How would you say you interview for those types of collaborative traits or kind of that low ego? Is there a particular approach that you've learned is effective in not just getting people who are good at interviewing, but who actually will exhibit those traits in practice?
Yeah, so I mean, one obvious area is how naturally curious someone is when they
Love that.
come to each of our interviews, right? Did they
Hmm.
do their homework up front on the person interviewing them, on the company?
Hmm.
And are they asking unique questions and maybe not just a laundry list of questions they had prepared, but you know, do they ask second, third layer type questions? I think people who are naturally curious have a knack to wanting to
Hmm.
learn. And then the types of questions they ask, well, we dive into people's strengths and weaknesses as well. And the types of questions people ask, you can see if it's oriented more towards mission driven curiosity or if it's completely focused on, selfish, like how will I hit my quota type questions.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. All right. And then in terms of people sort of and how they develop their careers at UserGems, how do you think about that in terms of the promotion path? Do you try to target like a certain percentage of your AEs, for example, from, kind of junior roles or SDR roles to be promoted internally versus external hires? How do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think for us, there's two things. One is what does our future AE team look like? And right now, a third of our AEs today came from the ADR team or SDRs as they call them at most
Hmm.
orgs. Our ADRs actually roll under marketing here.
Okay.
And so there's not necessarily as much of a fixed trajectory here that ADRs are kind of naturally supposed to go into AE, which
Hmm.
makes it pretty interesting. Our ADRs have kind of gone all over the place, right? One's in product marketing now, another moved into management, another's working their way through product team as our AI prompt wizard, right? And so, of course, we want to capture that talent for the AE team, though their options here are kind of a little bit more
Yeah.
diverse in some ways. Um,
Interesting. So, and I should have asked you this earlier, but what's roughly the size of the sales team? How many sellers?
So there's new business and expansion. Our new business team is 7 at the moment, and our expansion team is 2.
Okay. Okay. And all right, so let's get into some of the specifics then in terms of, some of the processes and tools that you use. Obviously, AI is the hot topic that everybody is thinking about. What would you say is your general view on where AI should be involved from a tools perspective as part of the sales process, or maybe where it shouldn't?
Yeah, the way I think about AI is actually not so different than the way I think about any other tool.
Hmm.
It should kind of just pass like a simple test. Does it drive more revenue? Does it reduce costs? Or does it make our sellers' lives easier?
Hmm.
And if it doesn't do one of those three things, it's probably just a distraction.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about where it fits in, where you've kind of done that evaluation and decided it does make sense to incorporate AI into your, sales and revenue org in some capacity.
Yeah, when I think about the AI that we have incorporated, the biggest one is actually we drink our own champagne and use our product, right? And
Hmm.
that is truly the highest leverage use of AI
Right.
at
Makes
UserGems
sense.
today. Our ADRs and AEs have actually roughly tripled the number of outbound meetings they are able to book per rep in the past year, right? That comes down to no more manual account selection, list building, research. They show up in outreach every day with their top 5
Hmm.
accounts and top 30 prospects selected for them. We use it
Amazing.
systemically. Yeah. And then we have other AI use cases outside of UserGems that we're starting to explore. We use Claude systemically for things like call scoring, enablement,
Hmm.
deal analysis. And then, just like any other tool, right, you're going to have some reps who are in that tool all the time, early
Hmm.
adopters. And so a lot of individual reps are finding their own use cases as well, building really tailored business cases, personalizing mid funnel outreach, things like that.
Yeah, we're starting to see kind of a language come up around AI fluency. So, sort of the idea being there's a spectrum from, you know, on one end of the spectrum, people are, sort of using, Claude or ChatGPT instead of Google and asking some questions. On the other end of the spectrum, they're doing, completely custom workflows, building apps using Claude Code. Where would you put either you personally and then your org more broadly kind of on that spectrum? How do you think about that? Or do you think about that?
It's hard to place the entire org on the
Sure.
spectrum, but
Sure.
as individuals, what I've seen is we are really widely spread through that
Hmm.
spectrum. Personally, I'd put myself more in the middle,
Hmm. Okay.
and I'm actively working and urgently working to change that. I was actually resistant to AI until a couple months ago
Hmm.
when something I read fundamentally shifted like how I think about where this is all going.
I'd be happy to double click on that. That sounds like an interesting experience. Can you share a little more?
Yeah, I think like really early on, I had a lot of natural fear and resistance around AI and whether or
Hmm.
not it would be net positive for humanity. I was more pessimistic around how it would influence humanity, thinking that it was removing a lot of critical thinking, making people
Hmm.
dumber, like
Hmm.
standardizing the type of like just erasing the personality and
Yeah.
individuality that I saw in the way people communicated. And it was, yeah, at first it really kind of saddened and scared me. And I also was the skeptic thinking it'd take away a lot of important jobs and people would have
Hmm.
nothing to do. I read an article. It was a really well written piece. I can go dig it up and send it to you at some point, but it made a really strong argument and kind of reshaped my perspective on how AI isn't any different than probably any other major
Another
technological advancement
interesting.
in our history.
Yeah, no, I would love to hear about it actually, and we'll put it in the notes of the thing if you can find it, because you certainly have me curious to read it, because it's those are the questions I think that most of us are asking pretty much every day nowadays.
Yeah.
So definitely interested in that perspective. All right, cool. So before we move into some of the specifics about user gems and your RepVue score, this is a question we like to ask in these conversations. What would you say is kind of an unpopular opinion that you hold about sales, or maybe something that goes slightly against the conventional wisdom? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think I probably hold a couple unpopular opinions. Maybe one that comes to mind here is that appearances still matter a lot on
Okay.
Zoom. I think for sellers, we're in this remote digital age where a lot
Yeah.
of, early sellers maybe haven't even like been in an office before.
Mm,
And
interesting.
I just think like good lighting, a solid camera, mic setup, audio visuals, put on a
Hmm.
real shirt, it sounds kind of basic, but I see so many reps who look like they kind of rolled out of bed onto a customer
Right.
call, and
Yep.
they've got the messy bed behind them or whatever. And
Hmm.
your buyer is evaluating, five, six,
Right.
7 figure, you know,
Right. Sure.
purchases with you, and they want to trust you with that decision.
Right.
Yeah, we want to look like we take it seriously.
Yeah, no, that's a great one, honestly, because so many companies are moving to remote, and even even within the distribution of where people are, sales tends to be more remote because of regions and things like that. So that's actually a great point. It's an interesting perspective for sure. All right, cool. All right, so let's jump into kind of the user gems through the RepVue lens focus of this conversation, because that's this is kind of like a human instantiation of the RepVue experience, if you will, in that where people come to RepVue to learn all these things about a sales work, and this is a conversation in that context. But let's talk about your RepVue profile specifically, which, frankly, there's no other way to put it, is pretty outstanding, honestly. And so, really excited to hear your perspective there. So, we do the RepVue Awards in the spring. You guys won 7 RepVue Awards, so various categories from product market fit to overall org on the like the smaller category of org to culture and leadership. Just incredible stuff. But the one that stands out really the most to me is quota attainment. So according to RepVue, and we're recording this in April, it's showing team quota attainment at 73%, which for anybody who's clicked around a bit on RepVue, honestly is practically unheard of. The industry average is sadly in the low 40s. So less than 50% of most teams are hitting quota, whereas at UserGems, we're showing 70+%. What do you attribute that to, and kind of what's their philosophy that supports that?
Yeah. So I do want maybe to make a quick point of clarification, even, and to add to all the wonderful praise you've just given our team. I think the 73% probably actually refers to the percentage of reps who hit quota.
Yes.
And I actually want to highlight another stat, which is on average over the past 4 quarters for attainment, we're between 117 to 135% on average attainment
As a whole team, you're saying?
as as a team. That's right.
Yeah. Incredible.
So I did just want to call that out. And really, where I think it comes from, I attribute it to kind of two things: a stellar product
Hmm.
and a world class team. Yeah, just a world class team. Great people. Yeah, it kind of becomes a self fulfilling prophecy and a flywheel where if marketing builds brand and pipeline, and sales
Hmm.
can bring in the deals, and customer success can create raving fans and build awesome customer stories that drive more interest, attract referrals, and ultimately get us more pipeline and customers.
Hmm.
That's kind of where most of that comes from. If I talk about like culture and philosophy wise,
Hmm.
to me, creating a winning culture is just everything and paramount. The way I think about it is winning is a lot of fun. Uh, Fun builds motivation, and motivation is going to lead to higher outputs. And where I think the traditional sales model gets things wrong, and maybe this is one of my other unpopular takes, is a lot of orgs expect the majority to lose and they want that to happen.
Mm.
I think it
Mm.
creates kind of this vicious cycle of constant churn, rehiring, onboarding, ramping, just burning a lot of pipeline through the process as well of getting kind of unseasoned sellers up to speed. And we've kind of intentionally tried to flip that model on its head here. We hire super intentionally a lot slower probably than your typical org. We think paying more per rep is worth it. Reps
Hmm.
are, happier. They choose to stay much longer, many years, and energy and culture stays vibrant. Tribal knowledge compounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I can see that in the numbers because your rep satisfaction on comp is both for base and variable and well into the 90 percentile numbers. I would imagine your average tenure is significantly higher. I mean, it's a small sales team in general, but I mean, how long is would you say is your longest tenured sales rep, probably there close to the time that you are, I would guess.
Yeah, probably joined about a little over half year after me.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
No, that's consistent with kind of what we see in terms of the numbers. And then, the funny thing is we haven't even mentioned the product market fit number, which is in the 97th percentile. And that, I'm sure, is what underlies at the end of the day, all of this, the philosophy and the approach and the collaboration is all well and good. But if you're not selling something that the market wants, it doesn't really matter. So speak to that a little bit. It seems like a lot of it is really, that provides the basis for all of it, I would imagine. Is that the case?
Yeah, certainly. I think without product market fit, things just become a whole lot tougher. And I don't know who it was. What was it? The founder of Gong who had a really interesting kind of statement of like, you want to build a product that the worst seller could sell, and you
Mm,
want a sales team that could sell the worst product. So having a best in class product certainly makes our lives as sellers a whole lot easier.
yeah. Okay. So let's jump into, like I said, we call this the hot seat portion of our conversation. But with your profile, I had to dig to find to find some things that were somewhat critical, and you still find them. Every sales org has criticisms and negatives, whether it's in reviews or maybe one of the ratings categories. And when I did dig deep to find a little bit of just an area where we could be constructive and see where was it not as much of a fit for in some cases. The only thing I could really find was in a few of the reviews. Anywhere there's a place with a strong culture is not going to be for every single person. And so I would say I can tell from some of the reviews there's some people who were probably managed out of the business or they didn't succeed for whatever reason, which is always a part of sales. And you still have to manage performance, you still have to do all that. Can you talk a little bit about how you manage that experience and that challenge, while still maintaining the overall positives that you had? But what happens when it isn't quite a fit? How do you manage that within the culture that you're trying to maintain?
Yeah. So thanks for bringing up the dirt and making this a 360 interview. I think you know what we've realized is not everyone is a great fit for early stage companies, and
Hmm.
and for user gems in specific.
Right. Okay.
Here we have a very fast paced environment. It's constantly changing. You will work through a decent amount of ambiguity during your time here, and so that sort of environment is not for everyone. I
Hmm.
kind of bucket sellers into two camps. One is the executor of the playbook, and they love just the structured, standardized process to follow. And the other is people who would just get so bored with the monotony of that and having to stay in a specific lane.
Hmm.
And they love working through kind of ambiguity and new challenges that nobody's seen yet or nobody has figured out how to solve. And so that life isn't for everyone. The thing about sales that makes management a little bit easier is results are pretty objective,
Sure.
right? There's a
Of course.
scoreboard. And when it doesn't work out, it's obviously a bummer for everyone involved, but we try to be pretty direct and transparent about it early on. And at the end of the day, no one wants to be at the bottom of the leaderboard,
Hmm.
and no org can really carry reps who aren't
Yeah.
succeeding.
Right. No, that makes sense. You mentioned something that I want to just dig in on, which is kind of like the ambiguity that comes with early stage orgs. I personally have also sold pretty much entirely in startup organizations, so that really resonates with me. And I'm curious, do you have examples that come to mind of where, one of the things about that ambiguity is people are always solving problems in different ways. And I imagine with you, both with a small sales org and also with the product that's evolved. I'm sure if you think back over the last 5 years, the product has changed a lot. Can you think of examples where, maybe someone on the sales team has really hit on something that works either as a sales approach or a target segment, or you mentioned like somebody from the ADR team becoming like the AI prompt guru, where, they come up with a new approach and end up in product. Like, I'm curious, given the culture you've described, if there's any experience like that that stands out.
There's honestly so many to point to. Yeah, I think one that maybe comes to mind recently is we've been entering kind of a newer competitive landscape, if you will. And one specific competitor has been popping up and our deals more frequently. And this kind of like, this is one of those things that popped up out of nowhere, right? And we weren't totally expecting it. And this seller went and created a whole basically Claude app for laying out the clear differences to help buyers um, explore which product is a
Oh,
better
wow.
fit for them and why. And
So not just to be clear, it wasn't just for a sales tool, but this is a buyer facing tool that they can interact with directly. Wow. Okay. Interesting.
yeah, so I think like those types of little use cases pop up, weekly, monthly, across
Hmm.
the organization, across the sales team,
Yeah.
where because of the speed of change, we'll face new objections, new questions that nobody's come across, nobody's documented.
Hmm.
I think with startups, agility is your biggest advantage and
Hmm.
being able to adapt to the new environment really quickly and be curious and figuring out how do we rewire things for tomorrow, even though today might be working well enough is kind of what sets us apart.
Okay. Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of the things you mentioned in terms of the culture that you have were very much reflected in the reviews, the anonymous reviews that your team is submitting, which is very cool to see. I think that sort of collaboration that you mentioned is a consistent theme. But one other review, which was a positive review that caught my attention, was talking about it talked about in a positive light the transition from user gems as more of a point solution to what it referred to as it said a complete AI agent. And I'm curious, what exactly, to just unpack that a little bit, assuming that that kind of resonates with you. What would you say, how can you tell us a little more about how it's a sort of a complete AI agent from a use case and user standpoint or user value?
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually gonna rewind the clock here for a minute, just kind of to our inception, right? We built this incredible brand and name around tracking past champions as just the warmest source of possible pipeline.
Hmm.
Candidly, we did such a good job of building that brand up that a lot of people unfortunately kind of still think that's all we do.
Mm. Okay.
The nice part is that that product set the foundation for what we're able to do today. Our CTO and product team basically had to build the most accurate data layer in the world because nothing out there met the quality standard and bar they set for being able to run automation off that data. And now that data advantage is our moat in this space. And so we're not really just champion tracking anymore. Orgs are running their entire outbound and ABM out of UserGems, leveraging what we call an AI command center to deploy agents across both the data layer and the intelligence layer. So to break that down into what it looks like for customers is before you had reps going into all these different products to source contacts, to source accounts in their addressable market. You had them researching all of those prospects manually, scanning for really relevant, timely signals to reach out to them, looking through, poring over closed loss notes for hours, things like that. And then you have marketing cobbling together different account scores in all sorts of ABM platforms. And trying to architect which accounts are the best ones to reach out to. And actually, today, AI can consolidate that all into one place. So sales and marketing are always targeting the best accounts and the best contacts at the same time with consistent messaging.
So that, you touched on so many different aspects of sales where it sounds like user gems can add value. Can you just help me understand or help people listening understand a little bit where it fits within the stack? So and what it replaces. So I'm assuming it's not, you wouldn't call it a CRM platform, or would you? In other words, would you use it alongside a CRM or would it serve that function?
We would use it alongside the CRM. So
Alongside.
the
Okay, so you
CRM
still
is
have a
still this.
CRM. Right. And then is it executing on the outbound outreach, specifically in terms of like email and messaging, for example? I assume it's not making calls, but is it doing those functions as well, or would you use other tools for that? And it's more of the brain of that.
It's more of the brain. It's exactly that. And that's exactly how our customers describe it actually
Perfect.
is it's their brain. And it sits between all
Got it.
their system of record, their CRM, and their systems of action. So think like your SEPs and your
Hmm.
dialers and your ad platforms.
Perfect.
And it's basically allowing everyone to show up in the systems of action with all the work being done for them.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. Okay. No, that's really helpful. Okay, good. So just to kind of wrap things up, then a couple other topics. One is, would love to hear your perspective, if you don't mind, how RepVue has impacted your business in terms of kind of where you see the impact of RepVue, from a sales leader perspective.
Yeah. Firstly, RepVue has been so paramount, I think, in helping us hire great talent. So thank you to you and your team for that.
Appreciate that.
think uh, I think there's two areas where I look at how RepVue has impacted the type of talent that we can get at UserGems. One is top of funnel, and one is like mid funnel, late funnel
Hmm.
candidates who speak with us. In all scenarios, people research everything now, right? Like people will research what type of toothbrush they want next, let alone
Hmm.
like where they're going to spend their next couple of years trying
Right.
to
Of
make a
course.
living for themselves. And so I think I get someone, at least one person in my inbox weekly saying they saw our scores on RepVue and want to carve out time to chat with
Hmm.
me.
Yeah.
And before anyone actually like makes it through the process with UserGems, we pretty much always hear them saying, "Hey, I was checking reviews and ratings, and like I'm so excited and stoked about what I'm seeing and want to validate all of those
Hmm.
things with you," right? And those third party anonymous reviews that RepVue provides and that level of transparency is, I think, a big reason that folks get excited and trust what we're building here.
Yeah, cool. We love it. It's great to hear. I think Ryan frequently says, Ryan Walsh, our founder and CEO, like that's the reason that RepVue exists, is to really help people find great sales orgs and make great career decisions. And so it's really gratifying to hear that that is working, and people are finding orgs like UserGems through it. So that's great. Okay. Last topic. Let's look forward a little bit. Like I said, we're recording this in the spring of 2026. If we think forward over the next year, it's cliche to say, but it certainly seems true that the pace of change certainly seems to be accelerating. I know when we work on initiatives internally at RepVue, sometimes we'll be considering something, and then we'll say, let's see what's out there next week, because it might be, the tool set might be different, the technologies might be different. So as hard as it is to do, I'm still going to put you on the spot. What are a few predictions that you have for what we think we might see in the next year in sort of the sales slash tech space?
Yeah, this is tough. I think making predictions in this environment is a tricky thing, but I'll take my best guess. A couple predictions that I might have specific to sales.
Hmm.
I think the low ACV, high velocity type sales rep is really going to start disappearing. Yeah, AI driven self serve PLG type motions for under K, maybe even 20K type
Hmm.
contracts are going to start becoming the predominant way that I think buyers buy from those companies. And that means that there will be a much bigger focus for humans in taking roles where the deal complexity is a lot higher, where it requires a lot more human judgment,
Hmm.
relationship building, and that trust between peer to peer. The stuff that AI can't really fake yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually I somehow skipped it, but I often ask the question of like, what is a skill or approach that's more important now than it was 5 years ago, or sort of before these AI tools? And it sounds like for you that might be some of those human aspects of that. Would you say that's the case, or would you expand on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's that human to human relationship building and
Hmm.
being able to read the room and read emotion and discern certain, micro cues on a call. And I actually think in-person interactions are going to start becoming a huge edge for top sellers, is getting in front of prospects and shaking hands. Yeah, that's going to have a big revival. I think it's already starting to have a revival,
Yeah,
candidly.
cool. Okay, were there any other predictions you wanted to get in there, or should we wrap it at that?
There's plenty of predictions here. I think to name maybe two more quick ones. I think the a lot of the giants that we see today, whether
Hmm.
those are legacy giants or the ones who have sprouted out of thin air, getting nine-figure revenue in like a matter of 1 to 3 years, right? I think a lot of them are gonna get toppled.
Mm.
almost as quickly as they appeared, as kind of these foundational models start to absorb their use cases natively.
Mhm. Mhm.
And with that, I think, the guaranteed winners are probably going to be like data infrastructure companies. Quality AI will always run on good data, and then regulated industries.
Mhm.
And then I unfortunately think that cybersecurity is going to be
Mm.
making out big in this space. So
Interesting.
yeah, I think AI's supercharging cybercrime in a way that we probably haven't fully processed yet,
Right.
and a lot of money is going to go into defense there.
Yeah, there's definitely a cat and mouse aspect of that, of, what AI solutions can be used in security or defensive measures to protect against the AI hacking capabilities. But I'd actually like to double click a little bit on that since you mentioned it. Is because I think that's the big fear of every software company and every technology innovator, is just that they'll get swallowed up in kind of this AI wave, right?
Yeah.
So from a product standpoint, and even specifically from a user gem standpoint, like how do you think about like what is the next feature that Claude will roll out versus what is, you mentioned has a moat or has a unique value proposition or defensive position to be able to continue to provide value even as the AI tools get more and more popular or powerful. How would you classify that, if you could say what the line is there? And then how would you say that user gems is positioned there?
I want to make sure I understand this question right. The first line is kind of who is safe.
Yeah, how do you, I mean, you mentioned what is a fascinating and to some terrifying question, which is sort of AI capabilities just sort of expanding and expanding and taking on the functions of solutions that are sort of their own product or their own company today, maybe in 6 months or a year. Those are just kind of features of Claude or some other AI model. Do you have kind of a philosophy around what is more vulnerable to that outcome and what is more kind of has a value proposition that will stand on its own?
Yeah. So I think as far as who's most vulnerable, I think it's kind of these wrappers, if you will,
Mhm.
that
Okay.
are kind of just beautiful interfaces wrapped around the foundational models, and the ones that are candidly generating a ton of money
Mhm.
doing that. So my head goes to maybe some of these vibe coding tools, or maybe even some of these like support use cases.
Mhm.
Candidly, they've been ripping, but I think that they're probably the most ripe for quick disruption because there's so much revenue to be captured there. I think the folks who are a little bit more guarded are going to be, I think like compliance is a really strong moat, right? So
Mm. Okay.
healthcare, legal, finance type
Mhm.
AI companies are probably not so easy to displace right out the bat, just in the nature of trying to start that line of product, and also the nature of how those industries operate. Like, I think you're once you've got doctors on a system, it's not so easy to get them to move over
Mhm.
to a new way of working.
Yeah.
Just as an example, I think specific to user gems, right? We have to ask ourselves this question every day now. No one is safe
Mhm.
from the top 3, 5 players. And what I do know is right now, one of our most defendable moats is the data layer that we've built and spent years
Mhm.
building something unique that no one else has really candidly come close to building. That's going to service us well in terms of protecting where we end up. And the other thing is, there will always, to some extent, I think, be a demand for things that are easy to stand up and don't require heavy resourcing to stand
Mhm.
up. Not every company is going to be equipped to have their own internal cloud engineers build stuff in house and try to maintain that. And so what our product team has built is a product that provides value much quicker and a much easier way to maintain
Mhm.
than probably what people will build in house.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, I really appreciate the time. It's been really an interesting conversation because I've seen your profile and RepVue for a long time and have been really curious about what goes into creating an org where so many of your own sellers seem to really be not only happy in their job satisfaction, but also finding value and fulfillment in a sales role. and it's been interesting to hear that perspective from a leadership perspective. And kudos to you, and the founders and the team there for providing that for folks, because I know a lot of orgs try to do that, and it's not easy to do. So well done.
Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate that, and appreciate all the work RepVue is doing, not just for us as companies, but also I think it's awesome for the entire sales community to have the level of visibility that y'all are providing into that employer-employee relationship. So, thanks a lot. This has been a lot of fun, Jordan.
Perfect. We appreciate it. Thank you.